Hi, I am Mark, Pastor Mark, and I'd love to share a devotional with you in Lima, Peru. And it's hot out here, man. We're sweating good. So anyway, we just got done with a weekend of voting here in Peru. Of course, as a foreigner, I don't vote here in Peru, but the elections didn't turn out too well for the people, and it's quite obvious that the people didn't elect their leader. But anyway, I don't want to get into all that. So Romans chapter 13 and verse number 1 says, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. For there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God." And I want to go here. Listen, if you're with me in this Bible study, by all means, leave a comment. With this computer program I'm using, for the social networks, I can only see you if you comment. But if you comment, I could see it. But thank you so much. Let me know you're with me. And so we talked about on Sunday morning how to vote biblically. And by all means, I must have preached like 4 sermons together. We preached for an hour and a half. And afterwards, our people said, "Pastor, that was long, but it was packed." And he says it was really good. It was really long, but it was really good. And so, yes, so I don't typically preach for an hour and a half on Sunday morning, but that's what we did. And it was, of course, blessed. It was of God. And I just want to share a portion of that. And that portion of that sermon that we talked about were systems of government in the Bible, how different systems that God used to govern people. And first, recognizing that God is authority. Christ is authority incarnate. He said, "All power is given unto him." And John, that's Matthew 28, verse number 18. John chapter 5 and verse number 22 says that all judgment is given to the Son. And so he has all power, all judgment. He will judge all. He has power over all. And this is Christ. And authority incarnate, and God himself is authority. And why? Because he's the owner. Creation makes him the authority, and he created everything. And that's why we don't want to recognize that he created everything, because we wish not to recognize his authority. And so that's very sad, and that makes us delinquent. And this verse here is teaching us, and this passage is teaching us very much to recognize the authority of our civil governments and to respect them. And God is reminding us that their authorities are of God. They bear the sword to chastise the and punish the bad and not the good, and so on and so forth, to enforce morality in our society and not redefine it. And so anyway, we have the higher powers. Anyone in the military will understand and recognize that when authorities have conflicts, we always recognize the higher power, the superior power. And in Spanish, that word higher is the word superior. And anyone in the military recognizes the authority of the superior officer. My dad, one time in the Navy, was trying to show chivalry to one of the women on board. He was on one of the first ships that experimenting having women sailors on board. And of course, the first ones were very feminist and just really had to make their point. And he was offering the door. He was holding the door for a woman. She says, "I don't appreciate you doing that." He says, "Ma'am, this has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with what my parents taught me, to show respect to a woman and to honor her. I am opening the door for you." He says, "Well, I'm not going through it. I can get my own door." He says, "Ma'am, I'm going to open the door for you because that's what a gentleman does. Whether you want to be a lady or not, I'm going to be a gentleman." And he says, "I'll wait till you leave." He says, "Ma'am, let me put it this way. You look at this, you see this right here? I outrank you. Go through the door." So I love that story. So you have to recognize the higher powers, whether you like it or not. And let me tell you something, God is our highest power. Now, we didn't always have the civil government. We didn't always have the civil government. So let's talk about the systems of government that God has established and ordained to govern over man. Now, if we're going to look at from the beginning, and let's look at Genesis chapter 1. The very first form of government was God over all of creation. But the moment God created man, he gave man dominion. And it says right here in Genesis 1:26, and God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, over everything. And he's very much establishing over everything until the creepiest little crawly thing. Man was given dominion. Basically, God said, here you go, Adam. I am making you the ruler of the world. And Adam was without sin, and he had perfect self-control. I like how you say self-control in Spanish. It means you have dominion. It's dominio proprio. It means your own dominion. Self-control means you are able to dominate yourself. And it's said very much that way in Spanish. You are able to dominate yourself. And basically, Adam was given rule over everything. And because he was without sin and had no knowledge of evil, only knowledge of good, it was only when he took of the fruit he had knowledge of good and evil. But before that, it was only knowledge of good. And having this knowledge of good and having perfect self-control without sin, completely innocent, he was able to rule the world. Now, we're sinners today. No one other than Christ can properly rule the world, because when you rule, it demands a lot of self-control. And to put someone that has no self-control in government is dangerous. He will serve his own interests. He will seek his own vengeance. He will live for his own appetites and use and abuse anyone to do so. And we see that so grossly today, acted out so grossly in front of us today. How our leaders are just completely unhinged to pursue after their own appetites and their own interests, and not of the people. Now, so we have man, self-government, governing over yourself, over oneself. Benjamin Franklin put it very eloquently. He says, only a moral people can govern themselves. Only a moral people can govern themselves. Without morality, you can't do so. You need to be governed if you are immoral. And that's why the reward for immorality is always tyranny. And the more we are immoral, the more that's what the Russian Khrushchev, I'm not saying it, the Russian president said of our country back in the 60s. He says, America will be so weakened morally and economically that they will accept. It is weak, immoral, and economic. They have weak economics because they have weak morality, and but weakened moral peoples accept tyranny because they've allowed themselves to become ignorant and weak. And so we have always accepted tyranny, and it always will be the recompense for immorality. When the people return to morality, only then can they be free, if they so return. And a lot of times we see that hardly anyone makes that journey back again without there being drastic changes. So we have the government of oneself, and then the next form of government we have in the Bible is the family. And from Genesis 1 until the days of Jacob, we see the patriarchs of the book of Genesis. We see Adam, we see Seth, we see Enoch, we see Methuselah, we see Noah. And Noah ruled the world as dad. And he, as dad, was ruler of the world. And it was a father patriarch government. It was a family government. And God pulled Abraham out of the Ur of the Chaldees, out of Assyria, to show to using the family system still, even though governments were beginning to form, civil governments were beginning to form. And he had a few more generations with the family government calling Abraham out because of the way Abraham governed his family. And Isaac and Jacob, and because of the way they governed their families, God was able to rise up a proper civil government, which is the next form of government. And these civil governments are made up of tribes. What are tribes? They are groups of families. They're enlarged families. And these families form the civil government. And the civil government is only to carry the sword and to enforce that families are behaving between families morally. And it is not for anything more. It's not to define morality. God defines morality. It is up to our civil governments to simply enforce that. And but now we see the contrary. And I don't want to get to that now. I want to get to that later on. But we see here that the systems of government, we have dominio propio, sorry, in Spanish there. It's self-government, self-control. And then we see the sovereignty and the autonomy of the family, how an individual should care for his own needs and should care for himself and behave himself. And that makes him free. That self-control gives him freedom and liberty. The same thing with the family. The family should be caring for their own needs, and the family should be caring for their own problems. The family should be caring for their own finances, and nor should we be going to the government seeking them as a big daddy to care for our needs. That will only end in tyranny. Why? Because it's one form of government surrendering to the other. We had a problem with that with Babel and so on and so forth. And then we see the last form of government. We have in the individual, the self-government. We have the family government, the family unit, to govern itself by family, these fathers. And look at this. I want to show you this verse here on the family again. I want to go back here. I'm getting ahead of myself. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse number 3, the Bible says, "But I would have you know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of every woman is the man, and the head of Christ is God." Let me start with the head of Christ is God. We see that Christ, during his time on earth, he submitted to the will of the Father, to the commandment of the Father, to the will of the Father, and he was obedient to God's will, to the Father's will, unto death, even the death of the cross. And he showed complete submission, proving that God the Father, he allowed God the Father to be his head. And now, therefore, God the Father can exalt him over all. But we see here that the woman is, the man is the head of the woman, of course. However, before we get offended at that and call it sexist, it's very easy for a woman to submit to a man who is submitting to his head, which is Christ. It doesn't mean that the man is head without a head. No, the man can get ahead by recognizing his head, and maybe his wife will recognize that he's the head the moment he starts recognizing who is his head. And so don't lose your head about that. Okay. All right. Who do I got connected here? One person. Who's connected? I can't see you, man. If you're connected with me, let me see it. Comment. All right. Don't hide behind the tree of technology, Adam. All right. So I want to see who's with me. I need to say howdy to somebody. And all right. So we have that going on there. And listen, man, if men would submit to their head, women could see their example and follow it a whole lot easier. I did not marry. I married well, brother. Let me just say I married well. Sarah, my wife Sarah. But my wife Sarah is not a docile, weak-willed woman. She has a meek and quiet spirit, but understand that a meek and quiet spirit isn't the same as being docile. She is not docile. She knows how to govern herself, and she is a very strong-willed, strong-spirited woman. And she doesn't submit to me because I bully her to do so. No, she submits to me under her great strength of self-control. And it takes that. The Bible calls it a sound mind, being able to wrap it in. Now, whoever was with me, I guess I scared you away. All right, so nobody's with me, so I'm gonna misbehave. No, I gotta self-govern, don't I? Let me look at my notes here. Okay, so we have governing ourselves, the government of the family, the fathers, the heads of the house, and then we have the government of the state, the civil. I don't like calling it the state, civil government, to enforce civil behavior. What is the ultimate form of government? The church. What is the church? It is a called out assembly. And that's why God said things in the New Testament such as, brethren shouldn't be taking each other to court in front of the judges. They should be caring for that in the church. The church should be governing itself, caring for its own bills and for its own problems, just as a family would, just as a family. Now, these systems of government, here's if you're still with me after almost 18 minutes, here's the blessing. All right. Every form of government has to complement and back the other forms of government. Now, a form of government that is not backing and supporting and helping other forms of government, we call that person delinquent. If a person couldn't govern themselves, we would call them delinquent. They wouldn't pay their bills. They're not cooperating. They're delinquent. A family that is completely against society and doesn't cooperate, doesn't pay their taxes, we would call them delinquent. Even a church. Now, the problem that we have today is that our states, our civil governments, are completely delinquent. And they are not supporting nor backing the authority nor the autonomy of the family, nor of the individual, nor of the church. We see an attack on all of it. Now, today, what is most delinquent is our civil government, and that will only encourage further delinquency. An individual that is completely delinquent, if you put him in power of the civil government, he will cause that civil government to be delinquent. Put a delinquent individual in charge of a family, and that family will be delinquent. They're going to raise criminals. And have you ever looked at someone and said, please don't have kids? Your conduct is terrible. Please don't have kids. And sorry, I have 5 now. So anyway, but that's the way it goes. Immoral, wicked people, when they take over a church, and it's sad but true. Sometimes pastors are immoral and they take over the church. What do? Well, they justify their immorality through the church and lead them into apostasy. And how many churches are falling into apostasy today? And man, I got the glow on the forehead today, brother. God is good. Anyway, I'm not sure how well this program is connecting with people through Facebook. It doesn't seem to be working too well. I think people are just seeing us through the news feed. We're not getting notifications out. But anyway, if this was a blessing to you, I hope it was. Systems of government. And every system of government, personal, family, civil, and ecclesiastical, every single one should be complementing the other. The church should be encouraging the family to govern themselves, should be encouraging the civil nation to govern itself, should be encouraging the individual to govern itself. The individual should be encouraging the family, the civil government, and the church to govern themselves, and so on and so forth. And of course, the civil government should be supporting the self-government of the individual, the self-government of the family, the self-government of the church, and should not be intimidated by them, should be encouraging them. God bless you. I hope this was a blessing to you. Have a great day. And from Peru, ciao. Well, if this was a blessing to you, leave a comment or something. Share it. God bless you. We'll see you. I'll be continuing these for probably just a month more. God bless you.